Hello and welcome to Easy LA. This is Jen Run, aka Queen J, and I'm excited to announce that next week marks Easy LA's 10th episode, and it's the season finale. Yep, you heard me right. So, this is just a little pop in from me to get you up to speed, and I've got an interview with a heavy hitter in the game industry, as well as info about a Christmas movie in the works that I'm really excited about. It's never too soon to prepare. So, first up, I want to share with you a very cool Kickstarter starring a comedian actor I adore, Colin Mockery, who you may know from Whose Line Is It Anyway and The Drew Carey Show. The movie is How to Ruin the Holidays. It's written by Kevin Gillies and directed by Arlen Kanopaki. According to the creators, it tells the story of a struggling comedian who reluctantly goes home for the holidays and has to deal with her incredibly difficult family. This project is near and dear to my heart because I work with a lot of young adults with special needs. Now, the writer's brother, Mark, has special needs, and Mark got tired of seeing a very one dimensional portrayal of adults with special needs, often shown in a very undignified way. And so he has written a fully fleshed out actual person into this script, and I applaud him for making such progress because I think that's something we really need in Hollywood. But they've partnered up with a nonprofit comedy theater in Atlanta called Dad's Garage Theater, where Garmy's own Dan Bowman is. And actually, he is the person who turned me on to such an amazing Kickstarter movie. So please do me a favor, take a look at the trailer that is included in the link below to their page and take a look at this really amazing project. At least spread the word if you can, because I think this is going to be amazing. So without further ado, now I'd like to turn our attention over to gaming powerhouse Chris Diaz of Deus Ex Machina. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to introduce to you the founder and lead writer of Deus Ex Machina, a Canadian game company who has made some recent releases of games that I'm very excited about. I want to share them with you. One of them I've already picked up and I'm waiting for it to arrive. Please welcome Chris Diaz.
Hello.
I'm so happy you could stop by, and especially because one of your games is just flying in Kickstarter, and I noticed there's only 4 days left. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get people in on this. So I want to talk about two of your projects. Let's just talk about the one I was just bringing up. You have a D&D based game called Affinity. But I should start that one over again, right?
Affinity. Yeah, it's called Affinity. Yeah, Infinity. Well, that's the whole idea, is that affinity. It's kind of a play on that, right? So Affinity. It's interesting that Infinity is infinite, it's everlasting, and Affinity is just something that's related to something else. So I liked the name play on that. So
that is a great name play, and from what I understand, there's 3 parts to it. Now, do they work simultaneously or do you work them sequentially? How do you run the campaign?
the I presented them more of as a narrative series. Like it's structured in a game format. There are mechanics, it goes into the world, but there is a narrative that goes through them. So I'm trying to present them as having a narrative value as much as something that people can play in. And there isn't a order that you're supposed to read them. In fact, I make a point of constantly randomizing whenever I mention them, so you don't know which one's supposed to go first. It was slightly inspired by films like the Fountain and Cloud Atlas, the idea of having these related settings. So they do not directly interact with each other, really, in certain ways, and in some ways they do, but they have common points, a common thread. They have a common menace. The characters in the stories are named the same. So and then there's a narrative that goes through that shows them having dreams and flashes of themselves in these other realities. But players can choose to play in one setting, or have characters move between 3 via some kind of warp gate or something, even though that's not canonical in the story, or they can just read it for its own narrative value.
Wow. Okay, so you talk about these being in different settings. What are the 3 different settings that you're offering?
So it's a different mix of magic and technology. All of them are set in a manufactured world. So Paradise, which is mostly fantasy, about 80% fantasy, 20% science fiction, is set in a giant orrery, which is a model solar system. So it's a full scale version of a geocentric solar system.
Wow.
And so the planets are literally connected by arms. The sun is a small globe that surrounds the central world and so forth. Then there's Conestoga. Conestoga is 80% science fiction, 20% magic, and it deals with a
Nice.
bunch of human and alien colonies living on board this literally peanut-shaped alien spacecraft about 5,000 kilometers across.
Oh, that's
And
nice. I've never seen a peanut shaped one. I mean, I watch a lot of sci-fi. Never has
yeah,
anyone ever attempted the peanut shape.
well, it was interesting because originally a cylinder, and I decided I like the idea of it, no one knowing where the front's supposed to be. Um, so
Yeah,
it's a
it's
peanut-shaped
helpful.
ship, and people travel inside it in order to try to explore it. And it's obviously very very cavernous, and certain people have started to awaken with certain psionic abilities. And then the third one is Taurus. Taurus is a post-apocalyptic steampunk setting. It's a
Mm.
mix of 50-50 magic and science fiction, and it's
Mhm.
set inside a giant donut.
Well, Taurus. Hence,
Yeah,
yeah, that makes
yeah.
a lot of sense for those of you who love geometric forms and whatnot. So there's a lot of flexibility, is what you're saying, because you were saying before, like you can kind of skip around between the three environments and through
Yeah,
whatever means, really.
yeah. Well, the idea that if when I ran the game, I had players actually create three identical characters in three different settings. So instead of playing one person that would move between three, we would simply switch the game out, and they would move from one character to the other, but that character would have the same name, same ability scores, and
Okay.
so forth. And then we would play off of the interrelationships and the common threads that would surface between all three games. It's a very unique experience that I don't expect people to emulate.
It is very intense. And that is why it's great to get in on a project like this where you can have that all at your beck and call. Because if you were to try to do that on your own, you would probably just implode or explode, one of the two.
Yeah.
Um, so, out of the three, I mean, you're not supposed to choose your favorite because you love all your children, but do you have a secret favorite between the three of them?
um, I know I think the fans seem to like Taurus just because there isn't really a definitive steampunk game for fifth edition D&D yet, to my knowledge. There's tons
Nice.
of fantasy ones. I don't know if I have a preference. I have to admit a soft spot for Taurus, but I think as I have been working on the project, I think Conestoga might be my favorite. But
Okay.
I am trying to, I'm a bit more skewed towards towards science fiction anyway. But yeah, the campaign's doing really well. I think we're approaching $80,000 right now.
I
And
am amazed at how well you're doing. Your goal was only $4,480. You've kind of succeeded.
well,
How many fold?
that would have been a very very weak project. We had just enough to fund a small print run and the absolute bare minimum of artwork. So now it gets to be, and then of course just yesterday we unlocked the leather bound version. So
Oh my
now
gosh.
you can
That's
actually upgrade your order to a leather bound with foil stamped, embossed metal corners, and the whole thing is actually in a
ooh,
box that's shaped as a book. So you open this book and there's three books inside of it. So that
beautiful.
just got unlocked. So we just had a massive surge. So we're probably trending to hit 100K because
Wow.
usually the last 3 days everyone ramps up and
And
FOMO kicks in.
right, and here we are. We're at 4 days to go. So get on that
Yeah, and it's
train right
Thursday at
now.
10 a.m. Yeah.
Wow. And so when I was listening to the trailer, which I'm definitely going to be providing a link to here and probably a little snippet, I heard a familiar voice. Is that someone from the Ralph Report Garmy member,
Yes.
perhaps?
The whole thing started because there is a narrative segment to the story. I thought, okay, I'm going to take some of these narrative segments because I did this with Amethyst, which was my first Kickstarter about 5 years ago, and I got a couple people to narrate a certain segments of the setting.
Mhm.
And so I did it this time. So I was going to have one person do a different segment. So someone was going to do the opening scene from Paradise, one was going to do the opening scene of Conestoga, another from Taurus. And I got a bunch of friends to do it. And I asked anyone want to volunteer. And John Fink, our mutual 4-star member, John Fink, he said, "Hey, I'll do one." And he just blew the doors off. So I said, "Hey, you're interested in doing a few more?" And he's like, "Yeah. In fact, how would I bring a bunch of my voice acting friends to kind of upscale this into a full audio production with sound
Yeah.
effects and so forth?" And then I string in the music, put it into a video, and we've done three more. In fact, the last one, which is the second scene of Taurus, I just got the audio from him yesterday. That's going online tomorrow
Wow.
with my next update. And by then, we probably will have hit 80K, which unlocks the full audiobook. So for those
Perfect.
people who like the idea of this of these kind of interrelated settings, but aren't someone who plays Dungeons and Dragons, there will be an option to buy the audiobook. And so there's actually going to be a narrated audio play that's going to have John and his cadre of voice actors involved.
They approached the three scab corpses, with only one of them even partially intact.
Oh, well, that was easy.
Devon muttered.
Oh, you need to shut the hell up with your baited responses.
Augustus snapped. Sloane used a foot to push the helmet off, revealing the oversized eyes and mandible.
These things creep me out.
She said.
It almost looks human from the outside.
Yeah, and his voice is absolutely wonderful, beautiful to listen to. So I think that people really will enjoy having both ways to either read it and listen to it. And I love the idea. In fact, I want to definitely mention this other project that you did a few months ago on Kickstarter that I'm so excited to receive and can't wait for it. So let's talk a little bit about Naramata, and because this is not the D&D world,
Yeah,
now we're
you
totally in a different area.
Can't be more different than going from a sci-fi fantasy D&D game to a wine-themed board game.
Right. And I don't know if the people at home know this, but board games have changed a little bit. It's not your simple sorry or, well, I still like Scrabble. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I will play any board game, but this is the boutique market for board games has grown over the years, and they've completely changed. They're very immersive. There's so many different types. In this case, what I was drawn to immediately, of course, was wine tourism. I'm in. But I love games. So can you kind of explain to the viewers a little bit about what the game experience is like?
Well, specifically, there's about a dozen wine-themed games, but you're right. Like the games we grew up as a child are kind of reviled and disliked nowadays because we've learned how to make mechanics that are fun rather than just random and kind of mean-spirited. So the games we played, like Sorry and Monopoly, if you go to Board Game Geek, which is kind of a database, those games are on the bottom. In fact, I think Scrabble is the only game that survived relatively intact.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Game of Life and all those are pretty low on the totem pole.
I used to play that.
The new games are there's it's just a substantial increase in production quality and artistic merit.
Amazing.
These games are they have insane production values. Some of them costing hundreds of dollars by supplying miniatures and long maps. Some of the games can be played as a campaign for hundreds of hours. So there's about a dozen wine games in the market. The most well-known is a wine cultivation game called Viticulture, where every player runs a winery in Tuscany. And then there's a much more complicated game that's similar to it called Vinhos, a game which I also own, and that's set in Portugal.
Nice.
And El Vino and a couple of other smaller titles are all about wine cultivation. And I decided, if I was to do a game, maybe it should be about wine tourism, which nobody has done before. So instead of running a winery, which was a very easy way to making a game, I created a situation where players are playing the wine tourists. Specifically the wine tour operators. So instead of running a winery, they're running a vehicle that's driving across wine country, and you're trying to satisfy the tourists in your vehicle, and that gets you points.
Oh, and you really went off the hook with creativity on this, because it's not just you had a lot of fun with the vehicles themselves. How did you come up with the vehicle and owners?
Well, the vehicles are not like, there's a couple of vehicles you think you might see as a tour, but most of the tour guides are buses, and small buses or big buses. So, but ours are sports cars and Hummers and so forth.
I love it.
The vehicles are based off of real vehicles, but they're slightly modified. The people are real people. Every time you see a person, with the exception of the cover, every image is a real person. So the tour operators are real people. Some of them are people might know, like Ming Chen is driving the Asian car, and a few other friends that have supported the game. They also represent characters as well.
Yeah. So how did you get in on that? Did you have to get in at the early Kickstarter level as a bonus perk, or was it a kind of a, your best friends that have supported you along the way got those spots?
Well, we reserved those for very specific people, like the high rollers, the whales, the people that are willing to put down a lot of cash for that.
So
Uh,
your investors,
yeah,
basically. Yeah.
backers could get themselves on a tourist card. That was another option. So you could be one of the tourists instead of one of the characters. That you could do. I can't remember. I think it was like $250, and we've got about 35 of those. And so some of them are being duplicated just because the number is supposed to be 50. So, but yeah, all the tourist cards are also real people as well.
That is such a great idea to really immerse people in it. And what a great thing to have at the end of the day to say, like, this is a board game and that's, I'm in it. I'm featured in it. I think that's such a cool thing. I've never seen anything like that before, that kind of specialization. It was a good idea. So
Yeah,
bravo
the
on that
wineries are
one.
real too.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no, this features an area that I wasn't too familiar with too, because Canadian wineries are just not maybe something that I've grown up knowing. I've known about, of course, Napa because it's nearby. I know about, some of the French countryside. Tell me a little bit about the area because I think it is fascinating what a huge industry it is.
Well, Naramata is part of a much larger region called Okanagan Wine Country.
Mhm.
Okanagan Wine Country is a microclimate, so its environment is a bit different.
Okay.
I'm only about 8 hours away, but you cannot grow grapes very successfully where I am. But the
That's what
moment
I
you
would
hit
think.
the moment you hit Kamloops, something happens. It gets a lot warmer, a lot
Mhm.
drier.
Okay.
Osoyoos, which is still in Canada, is desert. It's actually extremely warm.
Wow.
And so, where do you go? Because you can go to the north and you'll see some of the more robust wines
Mhm.
in that area. And then you go south, you'll see Pinots and a few more that can be. Pinots are very popular. Pinot Noirs are very popular, and so you have this long stretch.
Mhm.
Unlike something like like Napa, which is kind of a large region, Okanagan is also large, but it's very much vertical. It's almost a one single road that runs from Kamloops all the way down to Osoyoos. It's about a 6 hour drive,
Okay.
and there are about 300 wineries in that stretch.
Wow. So you can just basically travel up that strip, hitting every one and end up very, very drunk at the end.
Yeah, my wife, my wife, my now wife, but when we were
Mhm.
going out, we started our first wine trip of significant note was
Oh.
us starting in Osoyoos. We went down to we drove to the base,
Mhm.
and we started in Osoyoos, and then we traveled north to Kelowna, and in 8 days we hit up 60 wineries,
Wow. Fun
which
research,
which you should
right?
not do, by the way. That
Not
is,
do have you okay, I gotta
don't do
ask this
that, by the
question.
way.
For everyone who's ever been wine tasting before, have you ever gotten kicked out of a winery?
I have never been kicked out of a winery once. Um, like I said, we know how to pace ourselves. Generally,
Okay.
I'm the person who gets drunk before, but I've never done a sideways like scene where I've been kicked out of a winery. I've never been that drunk.
That's
And
good because you're
yeah,
respectful. You're professional.
oh yeah, oh
You
yeah,
got it
yeah.
handled, of
No,
course.
I've never had that problem. I have a very good relationship with the wineries down there, thankfully.
Yes, and it's good to keep those up. I think we've all heard stories, and we don't want to be that person who's never invited back
Oh
again.
no, no, no.
No. Well, that's great. We can live vicariously through that board game and not get thrown out of anything. So that's a nice option. I am so excited to see these projects and I am so blown away by your company that you have developed over these years. Is there anything that is in the works after this that we should be
I've
looking
got
out for?
two projects. It's going to depend when these last two Naramata and Affinity get shipped, probably near the end of the year.
Hmm.
Naramata will be a lot sooner than that. But I have another role-playing game franchise I have called Amethyst,
Hmm.
and that is a but also like Affinity, it's extremely narrative,
Hmm.
and I've done two Kickstarters for that one already, so I'm doing a third volume sometime next year, and we're also working. I'm working with a local friend to design a hot sauce board game.
Oh, I am all in. Please.
So
Keep me
there's
updated on
that's
that.
something that not a lot of people have tapped on. There is a game called Scoville. We were going to call our
Oh,
game
okay.
Scoville, but there's a game
Makes
called
sense.
Scoville. But Scoville's about farming chilies,
Okay.
and we wanted to make a game where you're making hot sauces and trying to create a quality hot sauce. So you are getting the ingredients, you're trying to make the
Okay.
hot sauce, you're trying to create a good recipe, and then impress YouTube influencers.
Oh my
and
gosh, this is so great.
with the intent that you could take the hot sauce you make and then make a real hot sauce out of it. We actually want to make the chemistry and the
Oh,
ingredients valid.
okay.
So you can win the game, and then the person who loses the game could take the moral victory where you're like, you know what, I'm going to make my hot sauce. And you may have won the game, but this hot sauce is real.
Wow. Will you be selling any type of ingredients with that, or is that something that they would source themselves?
Well, like I said, the interesting thing is that my friend who's helping me with this, he's the one who's I'm kind of designing the mechanics, and he's kind of fronting most of it. He runs a charcuterie store in town, so he does his own small batch hot sauces. So we may do a combination where you can order the hot sauces through the Kickstarter with the game. So
That is so clever. Wow. We have a lot to look out for from you. Where should people find you if they're looking for you on the web?
I have a website, www.dsxmachina.com. I'm on Facebook under that, and on Twitter under that as well.
So
And
yeah. Yeah, and Kickstarter, right? So I'm going to definitely put the links for that so that you can get on there. Only 4 days left. Really important to jump on board before that ends. And it has been a pleasure to have you on. And thank you for sharing all of that with us. And we can't wait to see where you go next.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Alright.